Good morning, boys and girls. Remember, last Friday we started reading Pippi Longstocking, and we stopped where Tommy and Annika had just met Pippi, and they found out she told big lies, but they wanted to know if they could be friends anyway. So let's see what happens. So if I should happen to lie now and then, you must try to excuse me and try to remember that it is only because I stayed in the Congo a little too long. We can be friends anyway, can't we? Oh, sure, said Tommy, and realized suddenly that this was not going to be one of those dull days. By the way, why couldn't you come and have breakfast with me? Asked Pippi. Why not? Said Tommy. Come on, let's go. Oh, yes, let's, said Annika. But first, I must introduce you to Mr. Nielsen, said Pippi. And the little monkey took off his cap and bowed politely. Then they all went through Villa Cool's tumble-down garden gate along the gravel path, bordered with old moss-covered trees, really good climbing trees they seemed to be, up to the house and onto the porch. There stood the horse, munching oats out of a soup bowl. Why do you have a horse on your porch? Asked Tommy. All the horses he knew lived in stables. Well, said Pippi thoughtfully, he'd be in the way in the kitchen, and he doesn't like the parlor. Tommy and Annika patted the horse and then went on into the house. It had a kitchen, a parlor, and a bedroom. But it certainly looked as if Pippi had forgotten to do her Friday cleaning that week. Tommy and Annika looked around cautiously, just in case the king of the Cannibal Isles might be sitting in a corner somewhere. They had never seen a cannibal king in all their lives. But there was no father to be seen, nor any mother either. Annika said anxiously, Do you live here all alone? Of course not, said Pippi. Mr. Nielsen and the horse live here too. Yes, but I mean, do you have a mother and a father here? Nope, not the least little tiny bit of one, said Pippi happily. But who tells you when to go to bed at night and things like that? Asked Annika. I tell myself, said Pippi. First I tell myself in a nice, friendly way. And then if I don't mind, I tell myself again more sharply. And if I still don't mind, then I'm in for a spanking, see? Tommy and Annika didn't really see it all, but they thought maybe it was a good way. Meanwhile, they had come out into the kitchen, and Pippi cried, Now we're going to make a pancake. Now there's going to be a pankey. Now we're going to fry a pancake. Then she took 3 eggs, threw them up in the air, and one fell down on her head and broke so that the yolk ran down into her eyes. But the others she caught skillfully in a bowl where they smashed to pieces. I always did hear that egg yolk was good for the hair, said Pippi, wiping her eyes. You wait and see. Mine'll soon begin to grow so fast it'll crackle. As a matter of fact, in Brazil, all the people go about with eggs in their hair, and there are no bald-headed people. Only once was there a man who was so foolish that he ate his eggs instead of rubbing them in his hair. He became completely bald, and when he showed himself on the street, there was such a riot that the police were called out. That might be another fib. While she was speaking, Pippi had neatly picked the eggshells out of the bowl with her fingers. Now she took a bath brush that hung on the wall and began to beat the pancake batter so hard that it splashed all over the walls. At last she poured what was left onto a griddle that stood on the stove. When that pancake was brown on one side, she tossed it halfway up to the ceiling so that it turned right around in the air, and then she caught it on the griddle again. And when it was ready, she threw it straight across the kitchen, right onto a plate that stood on the table. Eat, she cried, eat before it gets cold. And Tommy and Annika ate and thought it was a very good pancake. Afterward, Pippi invited them to step into the parlor. There was only one piece of furniture in the parlor. It was a huge chest with many tiny drawers. Pippi opened the drawers and showed Tommy and Annika all the treasures she kept there. There were wonderful birds' eggs, strange shells and stones, pretty little boxes, lovely silver mirrors, pearl necklaces, and many other things that Pippi and her father had bought on their journeys around the world. Pippi gave each of her new playmates a little gift to remember her by. Tommy got a dagger with a shimmering mother-of-pearl handle, and Annika a little box with a cover decorated with pink shells. In the box, there was a ring with a green stone. "Suppose you go home now," said Pippi, "so that you can come back tomorrow. Because if you don't go home, you can't come back, and that would be a shame." Tommy and Annika agreed that it would be indeed. So they went home, past the horse, who had now eaten up all the oats, and out through the gate of Villa Villa Kula. Mr. Nilsson waved his hat as they went. Annika woke up early the next morning. She jumped out of bed and ran over to Tommy. "Wake up, Tommy," she cried, pulling him by the arm. "Wake up and let's go see that funny little girl with the big shoes." Tommy was wide awake in an instant. "I knew, even while I was sleeping, that something exciting was going to happen today, but I didn't remember what it was," he said as he yanked off his pajama jacket. Off they went to the bathroom, washed themselves, brushed their teeth much faster than usual, had their clothes on in a twinkling, and a whole hour before their mother expected them, came sliding down the banister and landed at the breakfast table. Down they sat and announced that they wanted their hot chocolate right at that very moment. "What's going to happen today that you're in such a hurry?" asked their mother. "We're going to see the new girl next door," said Tommy. "We may stay all day," said Annika. That morning, Pippi was busy making a pepperakor, a kind of Swedish cookie. She made an enormous amount of dough and rolled it out on the kitchen floor. "Because," said Pippi to her little monkey, "what earthly use is a baking board when one plans to make at least 500 cookies?" And there she lay on the floor, cutting out cookies. "Stop climbing around in the dough, Mr. Nilsson," she said crossly just as the doorbell rang. Pippi ran and opened the door. She was white as a miller from top to toe, and when she shook hands heartily with Tommy and Annika, a whole cloud of flour blew over them. "So nice you called," she said, and shook her apron so that another cloud of flour came out. Tommy and Annika got so much in their throats that they couldn't stop coughing. "What are you doing?" asked Tommy. "Well, if I say I'm sweeping the chimney, you won't believe me." "You're so clever," said Pippi. "The fact is, I'm baking, but I'll soon be done. You can sit on the wood box for a while." Pippi could work fast, she could. Tommy and Annika sat and watched how she went through the dough, how she threw cookies onto cookie pans and swung the pans into the oven. They thought it was as good as a circus. "Done," said Pippi at last, and shut the oven door on the last pan with a bang. "What are you going to do now?" asked Tommy. "I don't know what you're going to do," said Pippi, "but I know I can't lie around and be lazy. I am a thing finder, and when you're a thing finder, you don't have a minute to spare." "What did you say you are?" said Annika. "A thing finder." "What's that?" asked Tommy. "Somebody who hunts for things, naturally. What else could it be?" said Pippi, as she swept all the flour on the floor into a little pile. "The world is full of things, and somebody has to look for them. And that's just what a thing finder does," she finished. "What kind of things?" asked Annika. "Oh, all kinds," said Pippi. "Lumps of gold, ostrich feathers, dead rats, candy snap crackers, little tiny screws, and things like that." Tommy and Annika thought that it sounded as if it would be fun, and they wanted very much to be thing finders. Although Tommy did say he hoped he'd find a lump of gold and not a tiny little screw. "Oh, we shall see what we shall see," said Pippi. "One always finds something, but we've got to hurry up and get going so that the other thing finders don't pick up all the lumps of gold around before we get to them." All three thing finders now set out. They decided that it would be best to begin hunting around the houses in the neighborhood, because Pippi said that although it would be perfectly well happen that one might find a screw deep in the woods, still the very best things were usually found around where people were living. "Though for that matter," she said, "I've seen it the other way around too. I remember once when I was out hunting for things in the jungles of Borneo, right in the heart of the forest where no human had ever set foot. What do you suppose I found? Why, a very fine wooden leg. I gave it away later to an old one-legged man, and he said that a wooden leg like that wasn't to be had for love or money." Tommy and Annika looked at Pippi to see how a thing finder acted. Pippi ran from one side of the road to the other, shaded her eyes with her hand, and hunted and hunted. Sometimes she crawled about on her hands and knees, stuck her hands in between the pickets of a fence, and then said in a disappointed voice, "Oh dear, I thought for sure I saw a lump of gold." "May we take everything we find?" asked Annika. "Yes, everything that is lying on the ground." Presently they came to an old man lying asleep on the lawn outside his cottage. "There," said Pippi, "that man is lying on the ground, and we have found him. We'll take him." Tommy and Annika were utterly horrified. "No, no, Pippi, we can't take an old gentleman. We couldn't possibly," said Tommy. "Anyway, whatever would we do with him?" "What would we do with him? Oh, there are plenty of things we could do with him. We could keep him in a little rabbit hutch instead of a rabbit and feed him on dandelions. But if you don't want to, I don't care. Though it does bother me to think that some other thing finder may come along and find him." They went on. Suddenly, Pippi gave a terrific yell. "Well, I never saw the like," she cried, as she picked up a large, rusty old tin can from the grass. "What a find! What a find! Cans, that's something you can never have too many of." Tommy looked at the can doubtfully. "What can you use it for?" "Oh, you can use it all sorts of ways," said Pippi. "One way is to put cookies in it. Then it becomes a delightful jar with cookies. Another way is not to put cookies in it. Then it becomes a jar without cookies. That certainly isn't quite as delightful, but it's still good too." She examined the can, which was indeed rusty and had a hole in the bottom. "It looks almost as if this were a jar without cookies," she said thoughtfully. "But you can put it over your head and pretend that it's midnight. And that is that me or you?" Oh. Had a little extra music there, didn't
sorry.
we? That's all right. "You can put it over your head and pretend that it's midnight." And that's just what she did. With the can on her head, she wandered around the block like a little metal tower and never stopped until she stumbled over a low wire fence and fell flat on her stomach. There was a big crash when that tin can hit the ground. "Now see that," said Pippi, and took off the can. "If I hadn't had this thing on me, I'd have fallen flat on my face and hurt myself terribly." "Well, yeah," said Annika. "But if you hadn't had the can on your head, then you probably wouldn't have tripped on the wire fence in the first place." Before she finished speaking, there was another triumphant cry from Pippi, who was holding an empty spool of thread. "This seems to be my lucky day. Such a sweet, sweet little spool to blow soap bubbles with, or to hang around my neck for a necklace. I'll go home and make one this very minute." And we'll have to see what happens tomorrow. Join us again as we see what Pippi's going to be doing tomorrow. Come see us in the library.